1999 with the original Magpul. Richard Fitzpatrick gambled everything on buying a mold to make the original Magpul. That's the challenge when you become a certain size, is maintaining that small company feel, and you have to maintain a high degree of enthusiasts. If we weren't working in the firearms industry, we're the guys that would be normally reading all the forums and looking at all the magazines and all that stuff and trying to stay up what's on the latest trends anyway. What we really get excited about, man, is problem solving. If you're not starting with the problem when you come out with a product, it's a self-licking ice cream cone. Why'd you bother? It's super easy to make comfort-based decisions in this world. Do things that everybody else thinks are more reasonable. I've lived my life by not doing the reasonable thing at any point. And I don't regret a minute of it, man.
Welcome to Oil and Whiskey, an Ironclad original. Today's guests, we have the Executive Vice President of the absolute behemoth of a company in the 2A gun enthusiast wild industry, Magpul, Duane Liptak. Duane.
Howdy, gents.
Thanks for joining us, man. Cheers.
Thanks. Glad to be here. Cheers.
What are you drinking on?
I am drinking on an Old Forester Prohibition Old Fashioned.
Nice. You came prepared with a cocktail, huh?
Yeah. Nice.
Well, I mean, I didn't. You guys would all be imbibing, so I wanted to stay with the spirit of the intent of the podcast, right? So.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, Duane, we're super excited for this. We're all huge fans of the brand Magpul. So I was super excited about that already. I was so excited I had my Magpul shirt out this morning, and then I realized that I was going to get made fun of if I wore it on the podcast. So I didn't, and he's got his on.
I'm that guy. I wore the band T-shirt of the concert I'm going to.
He's the guy for there. That was the point we brought up. Josh was all like, thinking that it was on us that we're bad people, that we'd make fun of him. But I used the concert analogy, and
yeah, he can wear a Roadster Shop shirt. I can wear a Roadster Shop hats. We're from there. He can wear a Magpul shirt because he's from Magpul. It's just a little too fanboyish if you're wearing the shirt of the guy you're interviewing.
I would not wear a car show shirt to the car show. If I bought the shirt at that weekend, I won't wear it. Okay. If I buy a concert shirt at the concert, I wouldn't wear it. But if I've been to that concert multiple times and I happen to have that band shirt, why can't you wear that shirt?
Fair enough.
Yeah. Right?
You know what? You can.
Yeah, you go ahead.
No, I won't, because this is not a safe fucking space, because you're assholes. Well, I say all that about Magpul, and I'm super excited to get into that. But then I started doing some backstory research on you, and holy shit, we could do a separate episode just about the International Man of Mystery. I listened to a couple of podcasts you did, and I think your hobby ADD is unlike anything that I've ever seen before. This guy's been into fucking everything. You think I've got stories? This fucker's got stories.
Well, that's what we're here for. I saw trials bikes and dirt bikes, so
street bikes and fighter pilots, and I mean, holy shit, a little bit of everything. Quite a wild ride to end up where you're at now.
Absolutely, it's been certainly fortune has smiled upon me in many instances, and I've just been fortunate enough to land in the right spots at the right time for a lot of things. But that whole hobby ADHD has definitely been a driving force, and just interest as well. Guns have always been there, from day one since I was a kid, basically. But all over the place, just trying to experience as much as I can in this, the few trips around the sun that I do have. So definitely interested in touching and feeling a lot of different things, and it's been great.
You talk about wanting to touch and feel and experience a lot of different things. Do you think that is one from just the knowledge base of wanting to learn about stuff that you didn't know, or experience stuff that you didn't, or because you experience them, now it's over and you've got to go to the next thing? Is it a dopamine rush? Is it the kind of thing of like, oh shit, I've never done that, I want to go do it, I want to learn everything about it, now I do it a couple of times, and you're like, all right, well, I did that, now I got to find the next thing?
Yeah, to some extent there's that. And one is just an understanding of how things worked, or what it takes to get to a certain level of mastery at a certain discipline. And when you've achieved a certain level of success at it, or enjoyment, or however you want, or even understanding, I'm not saying it's that I'm an expert at everything I do by any stretch of the imagination, but when you've achieved what you feel like, or the certain level of reward comes back to you based on what you're experiencing in that endeavor, then sometimes there's something else shiny that you want to chase after. But I've learned something from each one of those efforts, really. And when you're in products, the product side of development and marketing as well, but mainly the idea of product, just understanding how so many different things work and how so many different disciplines function, as well as the equipment for those disciplines work, it opens up your mind to different solutions to problems than if you were just completely laser focused on one thing, at least for me.
That makes a lot of sense. The wanting to experience stuff and get to that next thing and learn, like you said, not be an expert, but know enough to satiate that hunger of like, I don't need to be an expert, but I need to know enough to have, a good conversation and enough experience to to check it off the list. Right. And be able to still do it or move on to the next thing. But that's a fucking curse too.
Yeah. You get
it is
deep,
a curse.
You get deep into it though, dude. Like I do with certain things. Like I kind of, cigars might be kind of cool, right? But I have like no desire to know much about it other than if I like it or not,
No, I'll have to know the reason why.
Josh dives into a hobby and it is like
just finding the humidity on the island and which way the wind is blowing.
I mean, he knows like the atomic
cigar.
Molecular structure of the, leaves that are making up the cigar, but it's the drying process.
To his point though, it's when somebody, if I'm going to go look at cigars is a great example. Like, look, all right, this one's lighter, this one's darker, this one's this. All right, now tell me. All right, so this one's from Nicaragua, this one's from this. Okay, so the leaves are different. Now I got to go dig and see why. Like, why do those leaves taste different? How am I going to know what I'm going to like before I buy it? How do I know like the dark ones are? And then you start going down that hole and you're like, oh shit, like cigars were being done in the 1920s. And then there's this story. And then you find a book and then you read that book and you're like, oh fuck, how did I get here? But it's better than going to the YouTube rabbit hole.
You still buy a pack of backwoods.
I don't need to know how Newports were made.
I don't think you want
it. So you mentioned, into guns at an early age. We got to get into the fighter pilot thing, right? And I know that's probably cliche, especially for you. You've talked about it and told that story 100 times. We've had some badass people on this episode. On this podcast.
But no fighter pilots.
Not one fighter pilot. Some badass dudes, right? So maybe some guys that could have been in Top Gun, but not actual real deal fighter pilots.
We've had like the fastest man in a piston-powered car.
Yeah, well, we've had John Force and George Poteet, but neither one of them actually flew in jets.
Yeah, I mean, both of them have flown
just on the ground.
Yeah. Not intentionally.
How does your knowing as you get older, looking back at your life, becoming more self-aware, how do the puzzle pieces start coming into play of that next experience becoming, I've got to be the best in the military and a fighter pilot?
That was an interesting one, and I never really wanted to be a pilot. I had always wanted, from age like 8 on, basically, I wanted to be a Marine Corps sniper, and so the Marine Corps was always on my roadmap. And I've talked several times. I was in a car accident when I was 16. I have a rod in my arm, and that was disqualifying, right? So I tried 3 times before I finally got into the Marine Corps, and I got enlisted as an infantryman. And I put in an officer package as well. I was kind of forced into it on Parris Island because I had college and the whole thing, which made my life very entertaining on Parris Island. But I ended up a year later or so, I was in an infantry unit, got picked up for the officer transition. And when we're in MOS selection, and like I was the absolute pinnacle of belt-fed infantry Marine with like the spit shine jungle boots and the horseshoe haircut and the whole deal and everything, hoorah. And so I did not fit the aviation kind of culture very well, but it was a weird time in that it was 99. We were doing the whole Bosnia thing and just looking at the political landscape and kind of geopolitical situation. I didn't know that we'd be getting into a land war at any time soon. I didn't know that we had the collective stomach for it at a national level. 9/11 changed everything, right? But and I was going to be an officer, and as an officer, especially as an infantry officer, your platoon commander time, and then the next time you actually get back into doing that job is as a company commander, essentially, and there's staff time in between there, and then you do major staff time as a major, and your next command would be lieutenant colonel. But you're no longer really doing the warfighter job. You're leading others to do that job. And on the fighter pilot side, the officers were the war fighters, and I was kind of chasing the fight in that. I had a company commander in TBS who was an F-18 driver, and I had some conversations with him and said, I think that sounds like what I need to do. And I'd passed the aviation selection battery previously that said I had the personality and mental acuity to be a pilot. I passed all the physical stuff for it. And so it was a matter of when it came down to MOS selection, instead of putting infantry on there as my number one choice, I just put aviation and went off to flight school, never having done it, but knowing that being an 18 driver was what I wanted to do. I didn't really want, I certainly didn't want to be, nothing against maritime or rotary wing or anything, but what I really wanted to do is I wanted to be a fighter pilot, right? So and so off I went to that, and it worked out. Got selected for jets, went through intermediate and advanced jets, got selected for the Hornet. And while I was in the FRS, or actually while I was in intermediate doing an ONAV in Meridian, Mississippi, 9/11 happened. And at that point, I'm kind of kicking myself a little bit because the ground war was there and some of my friends from 1-7, the whole deal, were getting back into the fight. But it worked out. And I don't regret that at all. That choice was the right choice. Aviation was very good. I enjoyed it a great deal. Flying a fighter jet is pretty awesome. It's not a bad way to make a paycheck.
How far along in your training and ready to go being an F-18 pilot were you when 9/11 happened?
I was in intermediate jets in ground school, basically doing an operational navigation. It was basically low-level training when that happened. So 9/11 happens, and then it was just like, man, I got to get done with this training pipeline. And so that didn't happen until the end of 2003. 2004, I joined a squadron, and then in 2005, we went to Iraq with the whole squadron to support OIF. It was a 4TAC-6, I think.
What I know this is probably going to come across bad to some people, but I think that you'll get it, and it makes sense. During that time, 9/11 happens. You're trying to get through that training pipeline. What type of FOMO are you dealing with right then, knowing that guys are the thing that you wanted to do is happening, and now you're kind of somewhat quote unquote missing out,
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, the path I had chosen took me away from getting into the scrap as soon as I had kind of wanted, for better or for worse, and you have these romantic ideals of what warfare is like that don't necessarily always pan out. Some of it does, don't get me wrong, but and it's very rewarding. And I would say that having gone back after my first F-18 deployment to go on the ground with MARSOC, the bonds and the experiences that you have on the ground, it's super, super tight. Not that it's not tight in a squadron, but just it's a different kind of mentality when you know that guys on your left and your right and the middle of stuff is it's a different kind of reward and relationship that you have with those guys than necessarily. Now, don't get me wrong, I have lifelong friendships from the Hornet as well, and we've certainly been through some crap and some bad stuff, especially since I flew 2-seat, and so the guys in your back seat and the guy I punched out with, as a matter of fact, right? So that kind of thing. And I've dear friends to this day from the aviation community, but it's a different kind of experience on the ground. And when I was going through that pipeline and training, there were some regrets that I hadn't gone the other way, and that people that I knew were now in harm's way, and I wasn't there. Absolutely. But everything works out the way it's supposed to, I guess, to some extent. I was a pretty decent pilot, I'd say. So
what is that like flying into, first battle?
So, to some extent, where we were at in the time frame in 2005, the threat was very minimal as far as there was no air-to-air threat. We got vectored on some things that, hey, unknown rider, this or that you had to do a visual ID on it. And in the dark or whatever, bad weather, where somebody's IFF wasn't working, and it was usually a Pred or a Schweitzer or something like that was a friendly aircraft, but their IFF wasn't working. So not really any air-to-air threat. And the surfaced air threat at that time, apart from some stuff we did near the Syrian border where we got lit up by some SA-2s and things like that, not fired upon, but you're seeing the radar spikes and things like that. Most of it was just man pads and small arms. So you just stay at a certain altitude, SA-7 threat, that kind of thing. And it's not like you were worried about getting shot down or flying into the crap. You're just trying to do the best job you could for the guys on the ground. A lot of what we did was XCAS. There were a few, AI strike missions, things like that on known targets during that time frame, but very few. Most of it was raid support and XCAS, just being up there for the guys on the ground in case they needed close air support. Weather probably came closer to killing us than anything on the ground, or mechanical failures. I lost a number 4 main bearing in a right engine over Ramadi one night flying XCAS, and brought in one engine, but that's not a big deal in the Hornet, as long as you have one out of the two.
Not a big deal.
50-50.
No
This is
big deal.
like outboards on a boat.
Yeah.
You have a
Got
couple
another
of them.
one.
Yeah.
Is there any warning when that goes out, or is it just done?
That one, I saw some oil pressure fluctuations. It was a number 4 main bearing, and then the oil started dumping into the actual combustion chamber, and so the EGT started spiking, so we shut it down before it caught on fire.
Is that a mechanic conversation when you come and land that thing?
Nah, it's just one of those things that happens when you're turning a turbine at that, those kind of RPMs, and running through hundreds of gallons of synthetic oil to keep the thing lubricated. Stuff happens. It's just, and the Hornet at that point, life cycle wise, because Boeing had switched to basically Super Hornet production. A lot of the parts we were getting were reconditioned, as it were. So you'd pull 4 stab servos off the shelf to get one good one, that kind of thing. But so it was interesting.
That's got to make you feel good.
Yeah, real confidence inspiring, right?
Disregard that check engine light.
Yeah, when I hear number 4 main bearing, I'm thinking these things get small block Chevys in them. I mean, I thought they were like jet engines.
Everything's big. Everything's big. It's the engine's 12 feet long, that kind of thing. So it's you're basically sitting on top of 2 engines and fuel tanks with some electronics attached to them and some wings.
You mentioned weather was trying to get. Is that just wind in the mountains and stuff like that, or what weather is detrimental?
Visibility is really what kills you. The Hornet is one of those aircraft. There's a landing system called an ILS, which every Air Force jet has, and most like every passenger jet, things like that. It allows you to get down. Some of them are rated down to like 100 feet of visibility, or ceiling rather, 100 feet of ceiling. So if they have clouds as low as 100 feet over the ground and a quarter mile of visibility, that system, you can just fly that system and it'll safely drop you off at the end of the runway. The Hornet doesn't have that. We do a precision approach with the tower talking to you, and in places that don't have a PAR, what they call it, or a GCA approach where they can talk you into, the Hornet's precision approach capability is not ideal. So you're limited to approaches which leave you like 400, 500 feet above the ground. And if the weather's worse than that, it can certainly be bad. But flying in socked in conditions, icing, just no visibility whatsoever, that kind of stuff, trying to break out and land on stuff sandstorms, we get hit with sandstorms frequently. We divert due to sandstorms over in Iraq. You'd get some neat weather phenomenon like St. Elmo's fire kind of situations, flying through some of the sandstorms at elevation. We'd like green glowing sand particles flying over the edges of the leading edges of the wings and the nose cone and stuff. It was pretty wild. But
that's got to be wear and tear hell on a fucking airplane.
That's where your bearing went.
Sandblasted exactly where the bearing went.
And then, at night in general, low levels at night, tanking at night, trying to get gas off a KC-135 at night. That's an interesting proposition until you get really good at it. You're sticking a probe in a basket and trying to bend the basket 90 degrees, and that basket's like 6-foot hose on it, and you got to bend it and not hit the other aircraft, and you're in bad weather and you're getting buffeted around. You can't see anything.
In the air.
Yeah, No, so I
in the dark,
have a hard enough
on
time
goggles.
getting a little diesel fuel in my truck without dripping it inside, you know, let alone do that.
Then you got to swipe the
2,000
card,
feet
and
in
the
the
card
air.
reader never works.
And then I get
It's
pissed
super
off and I
inconvenient.
lift.
Please
Yeah.
come inside.
Fuck that, I'm not going inside.
Before we move on, you touched on it earlier when you were wanting to go, ground war path, that path, and becoming an officer. I don't know how far you got through it, but I wanted to. How difficult have you seen it, or was it for you, trying to lead, ground troops with very limited ground warfare experience, but because you went the officer path? I've always wondered that. Yeah,
so that's interesting in that when I went back to the ground side and the MARSOC side, I was a forward air controller. It's not like I'm, total Billy badass or anything like that. I did one, Fox Company deployment as air officer, and then I was a team JTAC on my second deployment with the hotel company on the west side of Afghanistan because they were shorthanded, and I just volunteered to go and just be a JTAC essentially with the team. So got to do a lot of very interesting and very cool and very rewarding missions. Got into a few good scrapes. Having come from an infantry background and coming from a firearms background, like I was doing periods of instruction at like the first shooting package I did when I joined MARSOC, because I was a competitive shooter in the whole deal, and hey, the fat can shoot, that kind of thing. So I wasn't at a deficit as far as performance of the basic tasks. Certainly wasn't a CQB expert, any of that stuff, strategy on raids, things like that. Had to pick that stuff up fast. But it wasn't necessarily me leading those guys. From the infantry side, I had, even though I was only there for a year, I was, Lance Corporal. I became a team leader very soon after I got there, was a squad leader by the time I left, still as a Lance Corporal. I was 24 at the time. I was an older kid. I'd done college, the whole deal. And so that maturity level and a tenacity for study, like I was voracious in reading all of the standard stuff, Clausewitz and the last 100 yards and that kind of stuff. Just really trying to understand the craft. And so I became pretty good at it pretty quickly. So I had that in my pocket when I had, moved on and done the officer stuff. I will say that the real thing you just need to understand, even coming from that background, let alone coming from, somebody out of college that goes through OCS, goes through TBS, and then picks up a platoon, you absolutely have to have good NCOs and staff NCOs, and you have to trust their guidance, right? To some extent, you're there for the administrative stuff, for the big picture, for the higher order stuff, making sure that stuff's taken care of, make sure your men and equipment are taken care of. Mission comes first, however, but all those things are sorted. That's what a lot of the leadership is as an officer, and really having good NCOs and staff NCOs is what makes the unit run and makes everybody completely combat effective and capable.
It's amazing. I've always found it fascinating, especially I've read several books, and one of them was Outlaw Platoon, and it's a great book. And basically, post 9/11, you saw a massive influx in enlistments from all different types of walks of life, right? And basically, you're testing again. This is an enthusiast and a layman talking, right? I never served, so pardon me if I'm fucking shit up. But basically, to the layman, so you've got guys, this Outlaw Platoon book, this guy's a teacher, right? 9/11 happens, he's like, fuck this, I'm gonna go defend my country. He goes in, right? He enlists, he tests, well, he hits the ground, right, as an officer, right? So he's got, a platoon of guys that he's leading that have way more combat experience than him, right? But he tested as a leader. And I'm not saying that's good or bad, but from the industry that we're in, that's always been basically promote from within, right? And you're leading a team of guys, and you never want to tell a guy to do something that you haven't done yourself. We feel, and I think it's true in this industry, you gain the respect by, leading in the correct way, but also knowing what you're talking about. Like if you're telling a guy to do something, it's because you've kind of lived that shit, Yeah. And I've found it very interesting of how you get it. Especially, we're talking about business. You're talking about saving fucking lives, right? So it's at the highest level that you can get, and you're hoping that this team of guys will trust you when you're new.
Well, there's also something to be said, like, about not knowing what you're talking about, and being forthcoming.
And saying,
them.
Hey.
And relying on those people, there's guys in the shop, there's certain aspects of things in the shop that aren't my forte, but you need to know that you've got people in those positions that you can count on 100%, and you just need to guide them from afar, right? Because they know what the hell they're doing. You just got to give them the work.
Role. That's it. Yeah. Exactly is the key. Knowing your role. It's like if the worst officers, and having dealt with it from the other side as Lance Corporal Liptak, the worst officers are the ones that come in and try to pretend that they know everything and try to run every aspect of the show and micromanage. Guys that come in and understand and talk to the NCOs. The NCOs and staff NCOs are really running the show. You're learning from them and trying to absorb the vast experience that they have and trust their guidance and their counsel. You're still making decisions. Don't get me wrong. You're the one on the dime for what that unit does or fails to do. But having good folks that counsel you is key, especially in those early phases.
Well, that's fucking awesome. It makes a lot of sense. That's all right. So you're rolling through. I'm not going to like yada yada war, right? Because that's a big part of your fucking life, obviously. But at some point, like you said, you got to move on. It's things are wrapping up, right? So do you have a plan after that? What are you going to do?
I didn't have. I intended to stick around, right? So the ejection broke my back, and essentially, not like. It was a wedge compression fracture. It was disqualifying for flight. It certainly hurt. I was shuffling around like a zombie for a while until that thing all sorted out. My spine's a mess with stenosis and arthritis and all that stuff from years of aviation and jumping out of airplanes and all that stuff.
What was the situation that had you eject from the airplane?
I had a dual engine fire.
Okay.
With two, if you have two, and both are on fire.
Then you're fucked. Yeah.
There's not a lot of options at that point. Yeah. We rode it for 9 minutes trying to figure it out, and it was a really weird failure that I think they've changed some of the warnings and cautions that are associated with that failure.
You go for 9 minutes with it on fire?
We did.
Where are you at? What physical location?
81 miles off the coast of South Carolina, Beaufort, South Carolina, when we caught on fire. We were doing a Pro A card, which is basically a post-maintenance check flight. They had done some maintenance on the aircraft. We're supposed to take it up and make sure it's safe for flight so that it can be added to the flight schedule the next day. All the systems have to be checked out. It obviously failed, but it was basically a clamp that wasn't fastened on a fuel line. That's one of the only place in the motive flow lines that doesn't give you a boost low caution. Dumped a bunch of fuel into the engine compartment after we did a high alpha maneuver, and then we were doing the throttle lockout check. So we were supersonic in afterburner that lit both the engine compartments on fire, and it was the engine compartments and the fuel that was on fire, although the indication is a dual engine fire. We didn't have any secondaries, all that stuff. So like EGT is basically a temp gauge for the motor. And the EGTs weren't high. The fuel flows weren't abnormal. The RPMs weren't doing anything weird. So basically it's us just troubleshooting, going through the NATOPS manual, which is like the instruction manual for emergencies in the aircraft. As we tried to get closer to the shore, because we were 81 miles off the coast, is just an airspace constriction. If people were using the other airspace, we were trying to get this out at the end of the day. If we'd have been in a closer, one of the close units, we'd have been able to bring it back and land it even as badly as it was on fire. But because we were so far offshore, we just didn't make it back. We made it back to about 31 miles offshore before we had to punch out.
So who retrieves you in a situation like that? I mean,
the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard, yeah. It was like 4:30. Hey, sir, can you pro this aircraft so we can have it for the flight schedule the next day? It was in March, so we took off, tried to knock out the pro card and bring it back, and obviously that didn't work out. And we were in the water for an hour. It was 52-degree water. We were in a hurry, so we didn't have dry suits on. It was right on the cusp of needing dry suits, so we almost died of hypothermia after surviving.
He's laughing. He's laughing, by the way. That's first of all, that's a bad.
All I'm thinking is all these people whining about these cold plunges. Everybody talking about like, I was in there for 4 minutes. I think I made it 6. Like,
an hour
treading water in the same water
after being on fire.
Yeah.
With a broken back.
Holy shit.
For a while, we were really wishing we would get colder, and then we were desperately wishing we were warmer. So
I went from from the government standpoint, are they kind of like, man, you can bring that thing in? Like, that's an expensive ass airplane. Like, come on, it's only 32 more miles.
Well, so what happened was we had finally got secondaries on one of the motors. We shut that motor down, and basically all of the fuel in all of the tanks had burned up at that point. The fuselage has burned almost up to the aft cockpit, and the left motor, that was the one that was still running, had started flaming out. So I was going to ride that thing until we, couldn't ride it anymore. And at that point, we couldn't ride it anymore. It was flaming out. We were going to fall into the ocean. So we turned it so we weren't pointed towards the shore, cleared for boats, and pulled the handles. But anyway,
wow. So that does a number on your back, obviously.
Yeah. So I had a bad back already just from years of tactical aviation, jumping out of aircraft, and carrying 120-pound SR rucks on my back, that kind of stuff. And that gave me a wedge compression fracture. So that disqualified me from flight for a year before I could seek a waiver to potentially fly again. And so at that point, it was like, I could sit here and ride the Pine for a year and then maybe not be granted a waiver to fly again. And then that'd be a mess. So I decided at that point, I took a med sep and started figuring out what I was going to do with the rest of my life. I'd always wanted to do the firearms industry. And that was something I'd wanted to do since I was obviously firearms. I'd started gunsmithing at the age of 12, first paid gunsmithing gig at 17. And so somewhere in the firearms industry is where I wanted to land. And I really loved, kind of the whole product development, that kind of thing. I was big into training as well. I ended up I was looking through, I was actually ordering scope rings for something that I wanted to work on as soon as I could stand up again, because I was, bedridden after some procedures. And I ordered them off of the Brownells website, and I saw they had job openings. So I applied for a job opening there, and it paid like 1/3 of what my current compensation was, but they had 2 openings. I was like, I could do both of those. So if you can squish those together, raise it up a little bit, maybe I can, make that work. And so I ended up taking a position with Brownells for a little less than half of what I was making as a Marine Corps major on full flight pay. And then ended up at Brownells and got into the firearms industry that way.
Oh, it's awesome. Brownells is a great company. How long were you there?
Only 18 months. That was a great experience. I learned a lot just because of the breadth of products that they handled. So I did, product counsel, what we accepted. I did the professional side product stuff and selections there, police store they were doing for a while, as well as helping with some of the product development stuff, doing the government programs and things there. And I ran the training division there. But 18 months later, actually about a year later, I ran into the guys from Magpul, and we had some good conversations. We were visiting them as a vendor. And a couple months after that, they started giving me a call about, hey, would you be interested in, coming out to Colorado?
What year was this?
I did.
What year was this?
Yeah. Oh, this was 2011. I started talking to them, and in April 2012 was my first day at Magpul, basically April 9th, I think.
What's day one at Magpul look like? What are you doing?
Day one, they had hired me to run the training group, and it was based on some previous stuff that, just we'll leave on the vine. They wanted to vet me out. So they did a big background check to make sure I wasn't inflating my military record. So they did all that, and they hired me to run the training group. So I ran Magpul Dynamics, was my first gig at Magpul. And so sorting that out, kind of getting back some of the reputation with the professional clientele, for both the training side and the product side. That was kind of the first order of business. And so I did that. And within, I would say 3 months, they had me sitting in on product stuff on regularity. Within 6 months, they made me director of product management, was what they really wanted me to do, is to guide kind of the product requirements and development stuff. And then another couple months after that, they made me director of product management and marketing, even though I had no idea about much of marketing. Once again, I dove into that quite heavily on self-study. But at the time, the marketing department, even back then, people thought Magpul was a marketing company that made firearms parts, right? There was 4 people in marketing, wow, including me. So it's like it wasn't a huge marketing machine. But learned a lot, super rewarding. Spent as much time as I could with Richard Fitzpatrick, the founder of the company, who fabulous product development and marketing mind, as well as Mike Mayberry, who was the first designer at Magpul, and that dude's certifiable genius. The boa connector, the little thing that ratchets and spins around, he designed that. He did mountain bike suspension, a bunch of things like that. Absolutely one of the most talented designers and builders and makers, right? So he's got Ferrari track cars and VW bus electric vehicle conversions in his shop, and he's always tinkering with stuff like that. Phenomenally talented guy. So I spent as much time learning off of those guys as I could, and I think that's served me really, really well. I owe those guys a lot.
I'm absolutely fascinated by Magpul, the brand, because of how diverse, seemingly not afraid of fucking anything, not afraid to take a chance to delve off into whatever it is, for better or for worse, right? And then also owning it of like, that shit ain't working, right? We're gonna move on to this, right? But it's amazing from the outside looking in. We have a lot of we have a few firearm and 2A business guys on the podcast, right? And I always make the connection of it's very similar to our industry in a way, because it's an industry of enthusiasts, right? And as enthusiasts, we are all a little fucking weird, right? And you have niches across the different industries, right? But we all want the coolest thing. We all want it to work. It better work if it's going to be cool, but it also has to have a little cool if it's going to work. Yeah. And then a lot of people want to have the thing that nobody else has, right? They want to have, like, I've got this.
And then you need color options,
and you got to customize it. And you got to do
the aesthetic thing is big too.
And so there's so much similarity, but in the gun world, in the 2A world, you have things that look cool, and you got groups that especially new, uninformed, guys that get into guns, they just don't know, right? And then you've got the group that it's like, if it doesn't have a military contract, it ain't for me, right? And it's got to do this, and you go a little far, right? But again, it's all in one community. I'm amazed at Magpul's ability to be on everybody's weapon and be respected across the board as quality, right? But obtainable, and it's not. You got companies like say a Knight's Armament, right? And that's unobtainable for most enthusiasts, right? And but they've got that brand name that's there, but they don't make things for the the common folk, the common people. So you've got other brands that we won't talk about in your industry that's like, this is all about the looks, right? And it's not going to ever have a military contract, and it's not going to hold up, but it looks cool, right? It might be anodized blue. And if you want to put some anodized blue parts on your AR, great, as long as you're into our community. But Magpul goes across the board of, from magazine, from when they started. I mean, it's to be able to pull your magazine out, but all the different things that they've done and the stuff. I mean, when you did the first plastic flip up sights, that wasn't exactly like something that everyone was like, oh, this is fucking awesome. But now it's just accepted. Everybody uses it, and nobody talks shit about it. And there's so many other, what I'm talking about. I'm probably not articulating it the right way. It's just amazing to me that Magpul is just a brand that's super respected, but they've just got things that work across the board.
Yeah. Would you equate it to like a low car in our industry?
I was gonna go. This is a low car.
That's like there's just stuff that's on every single car. You can't do without it.
Magpul is the low car of our industry.
Yeah. You get a car, you grab a low car catalog, and boom.
Who else is gonna make e-brake cables?
That's right.
Yeah.
But it's not all like super awesome, interesting stuff. You need it.
There's so many things though that Magpul, I respect Magpul for, that I don't know. This is from the outside looking in. You come out with a polymer magazine, right? And that takes time. They're willing to take the time to inform the industry and put the money up to show that it's going to work. And it's not like you can educate the entire industry in 6 months and be like, oh, okay, everybody's buying polymer. You're going to have people do it, but you're not going to get the market share that you have now overnight. You have to convince them that and you're still doing it. You're putting shit out there now that you're like, hey, we're still freezing them. We're still dropping them. You can still keep them loaded. The springs aren't going to wear out. You can still do all. And you're talking about 2000, when did the PMAG come out? 2010 or 11, 12?
2007, 2008, really mass availability of the first gen PMAG.
Is that an urban legend that you can't keep them loaded that it's going to wear out the spring?
Go ahead and ask the man.
Yeah, so spring life is measured in fatigue cycles, so compression and release cycles, unless you have a bad spring. So there certainly have been springs throughout history that are not correctly heat treated. There was a big batch of Checkmate, like 92F magazines during the 2004 2005 timeframe, and the GWAT that had bad springs, where if you left them loaded, you could salt shaker the rounds out, right? But a properly designed, properly made, properly heat treated spring will not be hampered by compression at all, as long as you're not pushing it past like what we call the solid state. So like when all the coils touch, that's solid state. You don't want a spring should not be designed to actually all the coils touch. Now there's nesting and all kind of crazy stuff you can do with a spring as well, but bottom line, all those considerations aside, if you properly design a spring for the application as intended, give it enough room, it will never wear out from compression. So you can leave it loaded from now until the cows come home. I have a big container of E-mags from back when my first day at Magpul, basically, or first week or month, that I loaded then and are sitting in an ammo can that are still loaded to this day, and every once in a while I'll check on them. We have Gen 1 P-mags that we've left loaded as, kind of fatigue life samples, and every generation of magazine that we've come out since then, we do short-term studies of that, like 90 days, 6 months, to make sure we don't see creep in the feed lips or changes in the dimensional characteristics of the magazine. And that's usually when 99% of anything would happen, even with a lesser polymer. But we have Gen 1 PMags, like I said, that are loaded to this day that still work completely fine. The properly designed polymer with enough reinforcement does not creep, of the right polymer. That's the thing, is like there's plastic that you make lawn chairs out of, and there's engineered polymers that you make what we do out of, and we do it really, really well. There's all kind of considerations with fiber orientation and things like that a lot of people just don't, kind of think about. But there's ways to do a polymer magazine that you don't have to worry about feed lips. Springs never are going to wear out unless you do compression cycle wear out, and that's like, a minimum of 100,000 kind of cycles. So it's like, if you go through 100,000 cycles on a 30-round magazine, you probably got your money's worth out of it, right?
So 2000 Magpul started, right? 99, 2000?
1999 with the original Magpul. Richard Fitzpatrick cashed out his 401k, gambled everything on buying a mold to make the original Magpul, based on an idea. We all, in that time frame, we were all doing, paracord loops and duct tape around the base of the magazine, because those 3 side-by-side mag pouches that were on the old H harness and even on the LBVs, it was tough to fish a magazine out. So everybody was doing that, and he got the idea, well, why don't I make a product that just takes care of that and makes it a lot easier and better to use? So 1999, that was the first product. In 2004, he had gotten busy enough that he needed to bring on employee number 1, who is Doug Smith, who is my current boss. He's the CEO and president right now. He came from like the police supply business world. Phenomenal business mind and manager of supply chain type stuff. So great guy. He's guided me along in my business education quite a bit as well, but he's been instrumental to kind of developing Magpul from Richard in his basement to certainly what it is today, and the kind of scalable infrastructure that we have.
I know that you've got, so shortly after that you got the anti-tilt follower that comes out, and those are going into existing magazines that are out there, and it's changing the feed. At what point along the way is he got, I'm going to build a polymer magazine in the head?
So after we had some of the initial stocks, kind of PRS and CTR, just discovering the material properties of what we were working with for some of the stock projects, it became an idea that, hey, we might be able to make a magazine out of this, because there had been other polymer magazines before. The AUG magazine had been around forever, the thermals, things like that, and they were all unequivocally terrible. But they thought that they had come across or stumbled across something that might just work for a magazine. And the first ones weren't perfect. They certainly worked well. And they understood a lot about magazine development through those early years, from 2007, 8, 7 and 8 into this 2009, 2010 Gen 2 kind of M2 magazine that we call it now, as well as the EMAG, which was based on kind of the SA80 contract, as well as HK416s for the different magwell kind of dimensions and performance requirements for the British military. But what we learned in those few years, or what they learned, I wasn't there yet. What they learned in those few years, quantum leaps, like the exponential learning curve, once they just finally committed to saying, hey, we're going to make a magazine, is a really steep learning curve, and they arrived at some really good stuff very quickly. And so even those M2 magazines and the EMAGs from those early days were posting up 21,000 MRBS type numbers, even back as far as them. So like 21,000 rounds between magazine related stoppages is pretty crazy.
It's unreal. And I'm so, there's so much I want to know about like the stepping stones of it, because it seemingly now you can, like, you've proven your brand, you've proven that you can make just about anything out of polymer, and if you put Magpul's name on it, then you're standing behind it, so the quality's there, right? But the amount of shit, like, now it seems seemingly easy, because it's kind of like, oh yeah, if Magpul's saying that they're making, you know, a stock to put your Remington 700 in, then it's probably going to work. And if they're making the DACA hard case, it's probably going to fucking be great. And I got to get one of those. I'm hating that I haven't pulled the trigger. Guy. Yeah.
I just traveled, actually last week, I brought 8 guns in 2 cases. It was, and every one of them was perfectly protected and secured. There was, to be fair, there's 4 of them were pistols, but it's kind of crazy what that system can do for you.
It's so ingenious. Have you seen it?
No, I haven't. Explain this.
So it's basically, there's 3 different size rifle hard cases, okay, right? But it's this modular, like, I'm gonna fuck it up. He's the guy. It's foam inserts that you can like put tension on all of the things that you're putting in there in a grid system.
Okay.
The easiest way to explain it is imagine a giant base plate which big foam Duplo blocks plug into, and you can adjust how you're supporting anything you put in that case to effectively isolate it and protect it from impact or moving around even more effectively than traditional 3-layer cut foam. And you can reconfigure it in seconds to do whatever other gun you want. So you don't have, if you cut out a foam that's custom for your SR25,
change
and then
scope,
you want to take a Model 700, then you just move the blocks around a little bit, and it's perfectly isolated and protected.
Why do you have to say SR25? Do you have an SR25?
Oh, of course.
Oh, fuck.
So, and I think you talked about this with Mike Mahalski a couple weeks back, right? As the large format guns are frustrating, right? Knights really does the large format guns very, very well. So
I know. I'm waiting. Me and Mike been texting back and forth. He's close. He's close on that new 308 gun. And
if anybody can nail it.
Yeah.
If anybody can nail it besides Knights, I think Mike has a pretty good shot at it. But,
yeah, I just can't afford Knights. I mean, SR.
You've got 2 kidneys. You only need 1.
Yeah, we're talking a different level when you're talking about,
yours are pretty shitty kidneys.
OG. Yeah, my kidneys are gone. But the DACA system itself, though, the expandability, and to Magpul's credit, like, I'm sitting here. He's the guy that works there, and I'm selling the damn company all the cool shit.
Yeah,
they're so like, it's so expandable. I get excited about it because I can relate to it in our industry, where it's kind of like, well, you're going to do this. Everybody gets excited about it, and then you can add this to it. Or you want to buy this, and you can add this to it, and you can. It's just fucking awesome that they do. But with the amount of products that you come out, some of them are very affordable, right? Some of them solve an actual problem, and you haven't lost the cool, like, street cred. You haven't lost the street cred in the fucking company across the board, no matter who it is. And those forums, and those guys. Our industry is very similar, where it's kind of like poo-poo on this, like, for whatever reason, right? Some of it's good reasons that the shit's not going to last. Some of it's just because they don't like that brand. And you get enough guys saying then that brand sucks and you've got to have this barrel. Like, it's shitty for a company. Magpul's never had to really go through that stuff. It was short of little things here and there, but as a whole, talking holistically about Magpul, nobody's ever been like, well, I'm not going to put that shit on my gun.
We deal with there's some backlash as we've achieved a certain size, right? That there's somebody that wants to look for the more boutique kind of smaller brand. You become we talk about annoying the establishment. Some people would contend that we've become the establishment. That's certainly not the way we look at it, because we still that's the challenge when you become a certain size, is maintaining that small company feel, especially within. I mean, you have to professionalize certain things, and you have to get bigger, and you have to understand how, supply chain management, that has to get big company stuff. But when it comes to product development and what the product is, requirements, design, product engineering, the folks that are at the heart of what we make, you have to keep a small company feel with respect to that. And you have to maintain a high degree of enthusiasts in that. Like I could probably take over a small Latin American nation with my product management team. Like guys with a ton of experience, real world stuff, like raids and recon out the wazoo, as well as conventional side guys that are enthusiasts in whatever aspect they do. And even on the soft goods and like the DACA side, we have guys that are, very, very much into the outdoor space, and other things that, with some ancillary touch on guns. So they understand that stuff, but we have all the subject matter experts on the gun stuff. And so we just bring it all together. But if there's a level of enthusiasm and excitement just about the products that you can't lose. If you start to get into a corporate mindset where it's like, what XYZ thing do we need to make to hit the, the spreadsheet, graph that we want for the budget, that's where it goes into the ditch. So we try desperately to hang on to the ideal of that feel. And I think we've done it very, very successfully. There's always going to be people that say, one, you should have made A, Y, B, or ABC. You don't know what you're doing, right? You're making the wrong things. I would argue that we're doing okay. And you should make this, you should make that. Believe me, a lot of those things that people ask for, we've looked at. They're on, it's not like we didn't think that some of that stuff would happen. It's just we are running a company, and we have to look at where, one, there is financial, compensation that we can recuperate from that. And the other is where we know we can make a difference to solve a problem. And that's what we really get excited about, man, is problem solving. If you're not starting with the problem when you come out with a product, you're just, it's a self-licking ice cream cone. Why'd you bother?
Yeah. You've hit the nail on the head, and that's what you've done. And I know it's intentional, but I want you to hear it from an enthusiast, that because you've continued to solve problems, it almost makes your job at the marketing and the selling easier, because you don't have to explain everything that new product does, because the last 5 products have solved those problems and everybody's liked those things. So I found it the other day. I was scrolling around on your website, and I don't need any more shooting glasses.
You looking for what, like a cigarette holder?
No.
I
don't need any more shooting glasses, right?
That's a product idea.
You come out, but you've got glasses, and I'm looking at it. I'm like, I don't need any, but I bet you if Magpul's doing them, there's for a fucking reason. And they're probably better than everybody else's. So I'm like, shit, I got to order some fucking glasses.
Yeah.
Right?
I was gonna say they're probably at the point where they just start creating problems to then solve the problem.
And they do it with everything. The backup site stuff. You haven't just said, fuck it, we did that one and it's good enough. You continue to, but you don't just do one. You do, version 3 now on the stuff. You take some of the stuff from the pros and put it in the polymers, and you're like, not everybody needs the pros or can afford them, so we're going to do this. You're pretty damn good. There's so much shit that you do. And now the new, where's the translucent mag come from? That thing's fucking cool, the T-mag.
So we've been trying to do that since the early days of the PMAG, because people have asked for it, and there are legitimate reasons for it. Like the mag level window is probably a superior method of determining how many rounds you have left remaining with a visual check in the magazine than a translucent, because at around 14 rounds, it goes up into the mag well on an AR and you can't see it anymore, right? So you have really no idea of what you have left. The mag level window with that little leg on the spring, which decrements through the numbers, tells you more exactly. So that was a better system, but if you're using sims, if you're using blanks, or if you have guard force turnovers where you have to have accountability, or if you have different projectiles and you want to make sure what's loaded the whole way through the magazine, there's some relevant information to be had there from a translucent mag. So we've always been trying to do that. The challenge has been with an unreinforced or even with a slightly reinforced translucent material, it was just previously impossible to meet military performance requirements. There's a test document, TOP 32045, that talks about the rough handling and the drop characteristics, -60 to +180 in rough handling, full weapon drops in the gun, 8.3 pound loaded drop weight, all that kind of crap. there's, chemical compatibility tests. DEET is tough on a lot of translucents, as well as a bunch of other chemicals. And the big one that killed every translucent prior was the dust cabinet test. So like grit, if you got a translucent material that survived all the other stuff, grit would just lock it up tighter than all get out. So you get sand in there, you get dirt in there, it's just not going to work. And there's a lot of translucent magazines out there. There have been a lot of translucent magazines out there. We've gone through dozens, actually hundreds of materials in trying to figure out something that actually met all our performance requirements. We finally landed on where we're at. We can meet all the 32045, full weapon drop, rough handling, outside the gun, -60 to +180 drops, as well as dust cabinet testing and everything else. And we, because we know that the mag level window information is more viable, we included a painted spring leg that decrements through numbers. So in addition to just seeing the rounds as they go up through into the mag well, you've now got that spring. So when you got 14 rounds or fewer, you can see what's actually left in the magazine. So it gives you the best of both worlds there, and it gives you a true military reliable and durable magazine that meets PMag reliability. The only thing you're sacrificing to some extent is overall, potentially, because we don't have the millions and millions of rounds that we have on it that we do on the Gen M3 PMag, long-term service life. But we want 31,854 rounds on a Gen M3 PMag without a magazine-related stoppage. So at some point it becomes academic, right?
31,000 rounds. Does you mentioned grit in traditional translucent mags? Is that by the I guess chemical makeup of that polymer going to translucent? Do you start losing some of the self-lubricating properties of that PMag or that?
So some of the magazine material, I mean, we could get into.
We can get deep. That's fine. I'm interested.
We could go. There's polycarbs or PPSUs. So there's urethanes. There's all kinds of translucent polymers that you can talk about. But the balance in any magazine that you're making. And it doesn't even matter material to some extent. There's resilience is the factor of returning to its original geometry after deformation impacts. So like metal is very poor at some resilience. Hardened steel goes back, but aluminum, and in order to harden steel to the point where it doesn't break or fracture, you accept that it's going to bend, and you can change feed geometry that way. One of the things that we've been very, very cognizant of with the PMag material is that you can deform it to a great degree and it will return exactly to its previous geometry. If you deform it beyond where it's going to 100% return, you'll get a crack. It'll return to near perfect geometry, and you can still use that magazine even though it's cracked until it's like, okay, it's time to survey this. It's still going to work as long as it holds rounds, it'll work. You'll never bend the feed lips on a PMag to the point where it doesn't work, and that's what we were after. I don't want somebody to drop a magazine and then think it's good, put it in the gun, and now you're getting double feeds like you do with a metal magazine sometimes. Softer polymers, especially when you try to go translucent, to keep them from shattering because you can't reinforce them, you end up trying to go softer. And then you also end up with a surface hardness issue, which means that grit embeds and dirt sticks to the inside of the magazine. You basically created emery paper on the inside of your magazine. Like some of the translucents out there in the market right now in Silkasil testing in the traditional military dust test, they'll lock up so hard you have to disassemble the magazine and like punch the rounds out with a rod because they'll lock up that hard with Silkasil and with the dust testing or sand or things like that. So the surface hardness, balancing surface hardness, toughness, resilience, all those things it's what we do. It's what the material science that we're after in the magazine world, is all about. And we finally cracked the code on the translucent side. So we're pretty excited about the TMAG.
So basically all that to say that you mentioned earlier that there's sometimes in the community a little bit of you became too big, right? So you are the establishment and you're going to go into buying from the boutique, right? And there's times when you need to support that small business, right? You need to give. But that small boutique business doesn't have that type of budget to do the testing that you're talking about on a polymer mag. You're never going to get that level of testing on the product. So, it's a give and take. complain about them being too big, but all that big shit's getting you the shit that you want.
The boutique thing, that's like an interesting conversation because you see it in a lot of industries. You see it in our industry. Yeah. You saw it in the motorcycle industry, and you saw it fail. You know, you saw like Harley Davidson. They got so big, and then it became like, well, I got to get a Sucker Punch Sally.
I just looked at one today for sale.
Are they still they're not business
no,
anymore?
it's on Facebook Marketplace.
Right, but it's like this boutique-y. It's, you know, it's not
they didn't
like
put any testing
mainstream
into it.
zero
nothing
testing
behind it, no engineering.
You know, that's a dude like probably MIG welding the thing, you know, with his eyes closed and just getting after it.
No helmet, just closing his eyes.
Exactly, yeah. But, you know, people wanted something different. They wanted something boutique-y, but it doesn't last. Like, the reality is that Harley Davidson's not going anywhere because if you want to get on something and ride it across country over and over and over again and own it for decades, it's proven.
Go ahead and say it. You say what you want to say because we see it in this industry. We see it in the chassis business.
I was just building up. I was pumping you.
We see it in the business that we do right now, and I'm sure you see it in the business that you do all the time. You see guys pop up, and you want guys to do good. You want competition. You want people to make a living, you know, in this industry. But then you look at the stuff and you're like, yeah, you can build a chassis. You can build a single chassis, but you haven't done the homework. You haven't done the research. You haven't done anything that it takes to do what it is that we do. And then you get the guys like, well, I mean, you know, you guys are big. Yeah, we're big. And that's...
Yeah, but with that comes the engineering resources, you know, and
all the shit that he's talking about, the testing and the stuff like that you're not getting in sales, right? But you're making sure that your product that you're putting out there is the best that it can be.
And I'm sure just like you could probably look at some of those boutique-y things and look at it and be like, well, that's going to fail. I know that piece right there, that spring, that clip, that thing, that's not going to last, or it's going to do this, or it's not going to do this. The same thing with me. I mean, I can look at products and there might be beautiful welds, beautiful finish, some talented craftsmen, and you look at something, you're like, well, that's going to fail like pretty quickly, or that definitely isn't going to work. That's going to ride like shit. But it's pretty, and then there's the like marketing, you know, you can market.
There's always there's hyperbole in marketing. There's guys that'll make all kind of claims without anything to back them up in your industry and mine. And that's frustrating. And there are people who buy off on that because their buddy bought it or whatever, and they shoot 100 rounds a year and it works for them, that kind of thing. So there's always that challenge. And there's small, don't get me wrong, there's small companies that do phenomenal stuff, Forward Control Designs and a bunch of other, there's a bunch of guys. I don't want to start picking favorites or whatever that. There's a bunch of guys that are on the smaller side that do phenomenal stuff because they put time in. They don't have necessarily the testing resources, but they do good engineering. They're smart and they think through some things. And those are the kind of things that we like to see. And we love that kind of competition. There's also the guys that, slap a different color on something, copy something, change it just enough to avoid the design or utility patents and throw it out there in the market. And it's, whatever. There's challenge. There's in every industry, there's folks all over the spectrum. We like competition because it drives us to continue doing what we do. And the challenge is even when somebody that does something that's really, really good, like if you look at certain like bolt action chassis, some of the things that we got into the bolt action, full end chassis thing with there were certain features that we saw and liked, but our ability to design for manufacturing as well as just to be efficient and incorporate some smart design. We did the Pro chassis. It's $1,000 chassis. It's not a cheap chassis, but it does what a lot of things that cost much, much more do. And then we did the Pro Light, which is like $600, and it does 90% or 95% of what the full Pro does for $600. So value for money is also an opportunity for us to do things. And it's not necessary. Some of the things that we do, and like the M-Bus is a perfect example. It's a great backup site. It passes all the drop tests. It does everything that a backup site should do. And it's spring biased to stay in the appropriate position. So it's actually more accurate than some of the metal sites that flop back and forth because they've got an upstop, but they're not spring biased into an exact position. So the repeatability is less. So our polymer backup sites are actually more accurate and repeatable than some of the metal ones. And they cost, a third of what, metal backup sites cost. So it's value for money has been a driving force for us for day one. And it's not like we want that to be the only thing that we do. Certainly, I mean, it has to meet the quality requirements. It has to be, we try to design for like, to meet the requirements that a professional top level end user would use. Like there's nothing that it's lacking in, but to intelligent design, reducing parts count because we just have really good designers and engineers, and setting requirements that make sense for what most people, the use case of the user that we're targeting. It just, you can offer it for a very reasonable price point as well.
That's you see what I was so excited because the correlations to what we do on our chassis, you know, and having cost-effective solutions, but you're not degrading the quality, right? You have something that does, like you said, it does. Our spec chassis
finding a way to build it faster, more efficiently.
Our spec chassis does 90% of what, you know, some of the other chassis do, right? Yep. But we're not going to degrade our quality, but we honestly understand that we want to try to be, and that's where I wanted to go with. It's interesting you mentioned the other brands and some of the boutique brands that do it right, but I'm going through the progression and the similarities in our industry. From say a new enthusiast or a new customer, right? You've had a lot of an influx especially during COVID of new gun enthusiasts, right? First time gun owners, first time gun buyers. We had a lot of first time chassis buyers and a lot of first time classic car builders, right? At the same time. And it's funny how you get some of those low-hanging fruit, cheaper brands that we talked about, right? You're not going to mention them, but I have no relation, so I'll talk. You know, you're going to have a Strike Industries or say a Timber Creek, right? You know what I'm talking about, and you've got those guys. The first time the guy's going in and buys that gun, he wants to accessorize things. That's some of the stuff that's hanging on. But you're also going to get a Magpul magazine at the first gun purchase. Right. Yep. And then he's going to go through and he's going to start consuming information. If he's anything like us that we talked about, you're going to consume information. You're going to learn. You're going to do that. You're going to go out there, test. You're going to go train. You're going to start reading what other people say works, what doesn't work. And you're wanting to continue to get better, not to expert level, but where you kind of feel satiated in learning. Then you're going to go to the next thing. The next thing's gonna be a little bit nicer gun, a little bit nicer AR. Maybe you want to build one, right? Maybe you're gonna do a Noveske barrel. Maybe you're gonna do some of this kind of stuff. You're still gonna run a Magpul magazine, right? Or you're gonna maybe run a Magpul stock. You're gonna run a Magpul grip. You've got this stuff. Then you find those boutique brands like a Forward Control, right? You know, or stuff like that. As you progress through, but all along the way, you're still running Magpul, and it never loses. You never leave Magpul behind and move to something else. It's the same way on the Roadster shop. Like the spec chassis is kind of your gateway, your entry, right? But you can go all the way along to the stupid, crazy Pantera whatever that we're building right now, all the way to the top of the thing. Like, and you don't lose the cool along the way. Like there's so many things, and I'm so interested or so intrigued by your brand particularly because I don't know of another brand that's done it that way to where you have something for everybody. And an entry level all the way up to the guy that buys the SR25, right? And you're gonna still run that pattern mag. Like it's
in a lot of cases the same product.
Yeah, it's so fucking cool, and hats off to you. And I would love to know if that was planned or how you do it on a daily basis. Especially now, they're coming out with the P320 grip modules. Like they're the weather tech of the. If you can make it out of polymer, right, we'll do it.
The crazy thing is like we're known for polymer manufacturing, but we use a ton, everything from press metals to correctly done MIM. MIM's come a long ways, and there's kind of like our MBUS Pro sites are MIM sites, but if you design for MIM and the way MIM is at this point,
what is
you
MIM?
can make probably parts out. The bad thing is like when you try to make stuff that's not supposed to be MIM'd out of MIM, then you're in trouble. Like if it was designed to be cut from billet and you made it out of MIM, you have different results. But anyway,
pretend like we know what MIM is, but there's probably listeners.
There's other people
that don't know what MIM is.
All right, metal injection molding. So it's what the process is you have a slurry that's made of a binding agent and a solvent and the base metal itself. So it's a powder. It's a powdered metal kind of process. It makes up slurry. You inject it into a mold and you mold it into what's called a green part. It's generally significantly larger than the end result part. That part then goes through what's called a sintering and potentially a coining process that heats it up, gets rid of the binder as well as the solvent, and then turns it into a solid metal part. And there's a coining operation potentially that can true the part up to correct final dimensions. And what you end up with theoretically is something that's very, very close to if you made that out of cut that out of a piece of billet, but at much lower cost per piece, although there is a massive tooling investment up front and a significant time delay to do those things out of MIM. MIM originally, there were voids and grain structural problems and things like that when it first came out. It's come a long way. We wouldn't have used it unless they sorted some of those things out, as well as the 1911 MIM parts, for example, got really bad rap in the early days because 1911 parts weren't ever designed to be MIMs. The angles, the way things were made and built, they just weren't designed to be MIM. Now, you can get some decent 1911 MIM parts now just because of the progress in the materials, but if you design something from MIM to begin with, you end up with a fabulous, very structurally intricate product or piece at very low piece price, as long as you're willing to do that investment up front.
So it's like a modern day version of pot metal.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
You can use absolutely great alloys right now. I mean, you're not limited. You can anything that's like equivalent to an S35 VN, like knife blade, for example, you can MIM that kind of stuff. You can, whatever the base metal is that you're putting into the MIM process, you can come out with properties that are very similar, and in some cases with higher density than like CPM or other crucible steels or things that are used in those processes. So it's come a long way.
Is Magpul finding their stride now? And I mean, I wouldn't say laser focused because you're going through all different stuff, but you've seen, if you look at it on a graph side, you're like, we talked about the actual first Magpul, right? And then ramp up, then it's PMags, and boom, off of PMags. Then there was a time they were kind of like, we can build whatever firearms we want. There's all kinds of firearms we could do, and that had varying degrees of success. And then it went into, all right, now let's get focused. We're going to do a lot of these different parts really, really good. But now you've kind of solidified, like you said, like the hunting, chassis gun stuff. You've got, gear side of things. You've got have you kind of honed where you've got your 7-8 different arms that you're just going to continue to expand on? Or is it like anything's on the table? Nothing's off limits.
Everything is on the table. And it's because I don't want to get bored. I've got the ADHD thing, and so does the whole team, right? It's not that we want to solve problems, wherever problems exist that affect us, and we have a bunch of different interests. Like, I'm a dirt bike guy and the whole deal there. There's things that I want to do there. But gun stuff, all the things that touch us, and we did the apparel thing, which was a passion project for the founder, and some things that we saw there. The eyewear made sense to us because of shooting glasses, right? So if you had actual ballistic eyewear protection, and they generally looked like birth control glasses.
No, you look super cool. What are you talking about?
you go to the range with your shooting glasses, then you need different glasses if you're going to drive home, because otherwise you look like. So you had these special shooting glasses. So we made eyewear that didn't look like you were going to the shooting range, that had full mil-spec ballistic impact resistant lenses, and that was why we did eyewear, because it was just a need that we saw, a problem that we saw solved. It's doing pretty well for us. It's not like we're challenging Luxottica on that front because of the way things are sold there, but it's a problem that we saw and one we wanted to solve. Same thing with a lot of the other areas. When you get into different firearms, there's an install base that you have to think about. Same with you guys, right? How many 1967 Mustangs are still out there that you need to, that you're going to be able to do things with, right? Same thing with, how many 1895 pattern lever guns. There's a lot of those. When we start getting to other more esoteric firearms, then there may be less of an install base, and then you have to deal with how many people are actually going to be willing to buy that particular accessory. And so it becomes a numbers game. We've become okay, I would say. You're never perfect, but we're pretty good at calculating what those returns are going to be. And so that's why, somebody would say, hey, you guys should make this. Why don't you make this? You're missing a huge market by not making this. And it's like, well, no, we're not. we really did the math. It's not like we're ignoring it. But you play those games, and it's not games. It's solving problems that we identify, in our own understanding of the spectrum of products that we interact with on a daily basis, where we have either material know-how, design capability, or manufacturing capability to combine to do something that actually is better, that we think is better, that we feel is better. And, if we can do something there, and it's an area that we've not been in, we have to some extent get customer permission to be there. And there's a lot of resistance in some things for a lot of the things that we diversified into. We call it customer permission. And like in the early days, if we made a Ruger 1022 chassis for the 1022, it's like, why are you guys doing that? You guys do like magazines for the AR, and you're an AR company.
Yeah, but 1022 is fun on the weekends with your kids and shit.
Exactly. And it's like, so eventually we got to a point where it's like, okay, it makes sense at this point, and we're going to address some of those things. We got some really cool things coming for the 1022. That's the process that we go through on a daily basis. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of this involved because of the pressure of trying to come up with whatever's next, right?
It helps.
That is the right thing for the company, as well as solving real problems.
What took so long on the dust cover, the polymer dust cover for the AR? God, it's a great product, but it seemed like it could have been done so long ago. And I know you're going to tell me why, but
no. So that one is one of the ones. So like selectors and dust covers and little bits and like, even charging handles or whatever. There were so many people that did some version of those, and it's in the basket. It's been referred to as kind of low hanging fruit internally, of like, you can do this, you can do that. It's not but I never wanted to do those things until we could add something to them. Until there was something that we were bringing to the fight, that we were doing better. I didn't want to just make a copy of whatever ABC or another version of something that was going to cost the same. It was just we were going to have Magpul on it. Yes, it would have our quality, and we'll do things like that if there's, a reason to do that. We did buffer tubes and things like that, just because it was frustrating to try and find real mil spec buffer tubes that met specs and had the real dry film lubrication, all that stuff. But something like selectors and the ejection port cover, I wanted to make sure that we were actually adding something there. And so the selectors, the install on those, there's no hardware except for the little tabs that come through, and they're super secure. They're a phenomenal selector. We did the ergonomics right. Ejection port cover, it's about the easiest thing it's like 2 seconds you can install that ejection port cover. You don't have to deal with the spring. The spring can never come unlatched. You ever see the ejection port covers that flop up and down because the little leg of the spring slipped out? That never happens. So it's things like that where it's like, okay, that's actually, even if it's incremental, it's a change that makes a difference to the end user. There's something that we're offering there that was not previously available, and it makes sense to do that at this time.
What problem is the SIG grip module going to solve?
Ergonomics for us. I never like the X5 is pretty good as far as ergonomics. It's not bad, but there were some things that we think were left on the table there. So in conjunction with that grip module, we do our own magazine release that comes with the grip module, as well as we felt that there needed to be more support for the heel of the hand, and alignment with the long bones of the arm with a natural, kind of grip repose could be slightly better.
It looks like a cross between like Glock and 1911 kind of grip angle, like in between there from the pictures I've seen.
So there's a kind of the K2 grip that we did for the ARs has a Steyr inspired kind of kick to the back of it. And a lot of the handgun stuff that we've been doing or looking at has some aspects of that. And it's an interesting geometry in that it really accommodates a wide variety of hand size as well, because it puts the trigger, it nestles into the hand properly to give you alignment with the long bones of the arm. And the other is that it allows proper trigger finger placement regardless, and it's not regardless, there's some outliers, but for the 95%, centroid solution, you end up with unimpeded, direct, straight to the rear trigger pull. And that's another thing we look at when it's rifle chassis or grips, all that stuff, is the ergonomics of how you interact with the trigger affects your experience when firing, initiating the firing sequence. So that's a big thing that we look at when we do any kind of grip, and the handgun grips have been no exception.
How do you guys deal with all like I feel like the gun industry is constant like trends, and some of them get legs and run. Some of them are around for a long time. What kind of analyzing do you guys do to decide if you want to dip your toes into that type of market and how far you want to go with that?
To some extent, that's handled by the fact that all the guys in product management especially are enthusiasts. And so we're the guys that would be normally, if we weren't working in the firearms industry, reading all the forums and looking at all the magazines and all that stuff and trying to stay up what's on the latest trends anyway. Some of there's, as you do it for a while, you get burnout and you start doing like paper patch cartridges and sharps, which I've done, and some of the guys have done. You get into revolvers for a while.
I gotta find something else. Yeah,
you gotta recage the brain. I'm sure you guys do it in cars as well. It's
100%. I feel like guns always like whatever you don't have, that's what you have to get into next.
Why do you think we're talking to you about guns? That's
it. So it's the enthusiasm is part of what helps you keep up with current trends, and anticipating what's happening rather than following is probably the hardest part of that. And so seeing the way other people solve problems, what's coming out, and it's like, okay, so this is happening, that's happening. So we see a proliferation of this platform, but what is missing in that kind of assortment of accessorization that we could really bring something to the table to? Or even in kind of static categories like bipods, it's like, man, the Harris bipod is an icon, right? It's been there forever. What do we hate about that? What's frustrating about that? And what does the next option have that we don't like besides a $287 price point? That kind of thing. So it's like, what do
you've looked at those same bipods.
Yeah. What are the products that you've not brought to market that's just a badass piece that you just don't think warrants the market there to sell to?
Laser printed PMags with Hillary behind bars, of course.
There are so many. The number of items that end up, on the cutting room floor is pretty impressive. Like the list of products that we have, like the process that we use is the ideation process is like anybody can have an idea, right? So that's like, hey, we should do an umpty frats. And then what we go there is to a product concept is this Octaflugeron needs to do A, B, C, and D. It would be different from other products on the market by 1, 2, and 3. This is what it would need to be. This is the price point that we'd probably need to hit. Let's talk about it. Does it make sense? And so you do a business case on that, talk to, socialize it with the designers and see if there's really an opportunity there or if it's just something that's best left alone. And a lot of things die right there. Somebody will come up and throw darts in it, or it's just like the numbers don't work out when you try to do a proper business case. But there's a lot of things that we would love to do that, it just doesn't make sense, especially when you get to the point where we're at with the way we make molds, the way we test things. Magazines not making it out the door without a 500,000 rounds of tests down range, and that's not cheap these days, right? So you're not making a magazine for really esoteric platforms or obscure platforms. So those are the challenges that we go through, is like, where does the payback occur? Where does it make sense from the install base and business case, even if it's a great idea? And there's a lot of things. There's things that we really, really want to solve. We just don't have the right solution for either. And but they float around, right? Bipod floated around from the time even before I got there until we released the bipod. It's like, hey, we should do a bipod, but what are we actually bringing to the table with the bipod world until we figured out exactly what we wanted to accomplish with a bipod and how we could do it? It's like, hey, this is what we need to do. And it's been phenomenal for us. So, there's a lot of things the pool never goes away. I won't say that when I say cutting room floor, it's like you don't discard stuff completely. And, there's a few things that you're not going to, some things you're not going to make. But that pool exists out there, and maybe technology we arrive at later down the road, or a new process or new material allows us to actually grab one of those things that we thought we couldn't do, and now it's reality. So that's something that we do on a regular basis, is revisit that pool of ideas that we wanted to do but just couldn't pull it off earlier.
Keeping the juices flowing, I think, is important, especially like you said, when you get into that size, and revisiting old concepts, old ideas once
your skills and your resources have gotten better. We do that over and over again. We seldom do we let really anything just die in the engineering.
We just can't
product.
do it yet.
Well, yeah, and sometimes it'll stall, and then we revisit it. And when you revisit it, it becomes a much better product. It could be a year or two down the road. You learn more, got better, and
better technology, better ways of building it.
Yeah, and then you knock it out of the park.
Exactly.
Can you guys do just a cheat sheet of abbreviations to what that actually means? Because from the non-military world, like, is there anything that you actually call it what it is?
No, everything's abbreviations or initials or numbers or decimals. Yeah.
Sorry, I get carried away sometimes. Is there anything specific?
I give him shit all the time. I'm like, I'm trying to buy something that's the ARC for the 18.4 with the 9 AP7.
Just the gun industry in general. Nobody calls it like you don't buy the new like Raptor. You know, it's
like
well, even like you're gonna get the backup site. It's the BS.
MBUS.
It's
the Magpul backup site. Yeah. I mean, that's what it stands for.
It's like getting
one thing that we've tried really hard to do, especially with our newer web endeavors, is, we've always had one of our core principles is education is the best form of marketing. And your point with the increase in new gun owners, we did series like, so you bought your first AR, so you bought your first shotgun. It's like, what do you need to think about with this thing? And it's not necessarily even talking about like our products that you can add to it, but it's the categories of consideration that you need to make sure that this is actually a functional arm that fits you and fits the purposes that you want to do with it. And we've done that with with a lot of our products now. We've done a slings page where we kind of talk through all of the different sling options and what each one does, because it's confusing. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of different options and a lot of different configurations because there's a lot of different applications. So we did a slings page that talks you through that. We just did a buttstock page that we recently launched that talks you through, what are the secondary tension mechanisms? What do those do? What's the difference between a MO and a regular, this stock or the SL or the CTR or the DTs? What's the DT mechanism do? What's the difference in butt pads and why are there different butt pads? Like we drop test everything to meet 32045 standards. So, and not a lot of people that make stocks do that. But the other thing is like, we'll do stuff like we'll go out and what we learned is on shorter length of pull stuff, like the original XM177 stocks, had the straight back end, right? And a lot of stocks have a canted 3-degree back end, 2 to 3 degree. And with a longer length of pull and a slightly more bladed stance, it actually works better for recoil control. But when you shorten that gun up and you square up more, the more vertical stuff, we did like stuff where we'd take out a camera and we'd slow-mo it and with a piece of plywood behind you with lines painted on it and have a bunch of different shooters shoot the same ammunition at the same target array, running the same drills and watch muzzle rise. And stock geometry affects that. So like we'll go to the extent of like, oh man, if you actually do this different angle on that butt pad, it across the average of muzzle rise goes down across a number of different users. So like that's the angle we want to use. It's not like we're pulling stuff like that out of our backside. It's in a lot of cases we empirically try to figure out what's actually best.
It's again back to the point of might be big,
but they're good.
There's cool shit with it.
Yeah, you figure shit out. That's for sure. There's people. You have the people to figure that type of shit out, or the time to put the effort in. It's amazing on the actual looking at muzzle rides versus the different stocks, and then the education you put in. That we look at trying to do that too on the education side of things to show like what does what, and that's key. All right, next thing. Hobbies that you've got into all kinds of stuff, but you're still into guns, you're still doing it. What's still on your list that you've got to check off as far as acquisitions in the firearms world? And does it ever end?
Yeah, it never ends. Like that's, I have a lot of guns.
Well, what currently are you into now? Because we all go through phases where you need to go through the long range shit. Now that's where I'm at now. I gotta have big boy reach out and touch somebody's shit. Multiple of those, right? Yeah. But what are you into?
I've gone through kind of a black powder cartridge little renaissance.
Of course.
So my sharps rifles.
Are you doing
1876
Civil War reenactments, or what are you doing over there?
I did that as a teenager. I did Civil War reenactor, but that would not be necessarily cartridge stuff. That was I had a Prussian musket, 69 caliber, part of the Irish Brigade back in the day. I was like 14. Anyway, but I don't do that anymore. I got into looking at kind of the buff runner stuff, and the Christian sharps, and post Civil War the cartridge sharps and the evolution of that, as well as the whole kind of buffalo herd decimation. Honestly, what it was, but got into that history and just the way they did things back then. I had some mentors in that space. Spent a lot of time kind of recreating the original stuff, learned a lot of things along the way with paper patching bullets and casting bullets, and how to load black powder cartridge and make your own lube and that sort of stuff, because it was different. It got me out of the AR mindset for a time frame. Now that's always there, don't get me wrong. Yeah. I'm always into the ARs and what's the latest, what is the professional end user looking for, but you need these diversions every once in a while to just make you think a little differently sometimes. But yeah, I ended up, it's a few years back, I took a massive bison with 45 110 or 45 2 7/8 sharps with a bullet I cast, paper patch myself, lube I made, in a rifle that I ordered from Shiloh that was a number 3 sporter that was basically styled after what would be a late Texas gun, 1876 time frame, roughly after the introduction of the 45s 2 7/8. And I shot a bison that had original Texas herd genetics in Texas. So, I mean, the whole thing just kind of brought all that to a culmination for me. And it's like, all right, that's a pretty big check in the bucket list. And so that was that was a very big thing for a very long time. Right now I'm into a lot of different things. Long range guns. I mean, I have a side gig that I build long range rifles. Got a lathe in the middle in the shop and sell a couple of rifles a year. It's not a big operation, man. It's just I do it for enjoyment and for my friends, basically, more than anything. But I sell them, have an FFL and the whole deal. But that's always been a passion for me. Precision is interesting to me. Hitting things at long distances, hunting at long distances, that kind of stuff is
long distance precision shit is. I know you've done a couple classes out there and done some, and I'm intrigued by the seemingly ever the chase for controlling some of the things that you
Everything
can't control.
Else that's out there.
It's those and trying to eliminate those variables, and you get it down to the thing where you think you've controlled everything, and there's still gonna be variances.
The next day, it's completely different.
And chasing those variances to where it's like, no, I want to put multiple shots in the same fucking hole at like 2,000 yards, but. It's physically, some of that stuff's physically impossible to do, but the chase to do it is what's intriguing to me.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely limitation, like hand loading and the whole deal, limitations of extreme spread and standard deviations in your loaded rounds, that kind of stuff. Consistencies in the BC of your ammunition based on MEPLAT evening and stuff like looking at Litz's stuff and all kind of craziness there with twist rates. And the bottom line is you can eliminate as many of those variables as you want, and this wind is still going to fuck you.
Individual grain counting and polishing ogives, and I'm intrigued by that. I think that's
that takes the fun out of it for me. You're just getting way too far.
That's what you do. You take the fun out of everything, dude. You get so.
What do you mean take the fun out of it?
Deep
I just want to.
I just use a bomb. Like, you got to get somebody from that far out. Get a fucking fighter jet. I mean, seriously.
It's the challenge to be able to do it. Have you gone down English shotgun world yet?
I have not gone down the English shotgun world. I'm not that. Yeah, that can get ugly.
That's a different. That's a different subset. That's not even really like gun guys. If you're an English shotgun guy,
is that like the flannel with the patch?
Let me tell you something about
$40,000-$50,000 shotgun.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars of finely
that's
crafted
like gun club stuff, right? Like,
yeah, but they're like, obviously I don't have any, but you start looking at that, like researching the heritage and the history into some of these gun houses that have been building these, and the craftsmanship that goes into them. It's fucking amazing. Absolutely amazing. But then it gets to like it's functional art, because there's guys that go out there to shoot with them, but like that's just a different world. It's a completely different world.
100%. And I can appreciate those things, you know, parties and Hollands and the whole things. But it's to some extent, I'll probably never be able to justify that in my mind. I'm a Pennsylvania redneck at heart. And at some point, you know, it's like I could buy a belt fed machine gun for that, you know. So.
The only time I would ever make the purchase is if I'm ever at the point to where I would make the purchase and shoot the shit out of it. If I could get to the point where I could do it and shoot the shit out of it and not feel bad about that purchase to see what it actually does, I would do it.
You got to be smoking like a matching pipe to shoot something like that.
I bet you it would enhance the experience. Smoking a pipe would probably enhance the experience.
Okay.
For sure.
100%.
I'm just trying to
100%.
picture the whole.
So, I mean, I saw you post on your Instagram, you're doing some, you know, trail bike riding, you're a street bike guy, you got into a little bit of everything. What's non-gun, what's the hobby that's consuming your time and effort right now?
Dirt bike stuff, enduro and hard enduro, a lot of stuff there, enduro cross kind of stuff. I have an enduro cross kind of track in my yard, as well as several miles of enduro and hard enduro trails. So
Sweet.
I don't have to go very far to do it. That's pretty awesome. My boys like it a little bit. Not as much as I do, but I race. I do enduros as well as some hare scrambles. Not as much as I'd like to these days. But that certainly, and just understanding the performance aspects in that world has been a lot of fun. You know, understanding suspension, what to do there with valving and all that sort of thing. Engine modifications on the 2 strokes as well as the 4 strokes, mapping differences, things like that. That's been a fun world to jump into. I jumped back into that. I rode as a kid and then just decided to get back into it as something to do with my boys right prior to the whole COVID thing happening. And then I've been doing that pretty hot and heavy recently. So, I mean, I have 7 or 8 dirt bikes sitting in the shop.
Are you in Austin?
I am west of Austin. I'm in Dripping Springs, technically.
Oh, Dripping Springs.
That's not where Jesse's at, right?
Beautiful country down there.
I am actually about, he's up on off of Fitzhugh, right? So it's like, I'm probably 25 or 30 minutes from Jesse.
Dude, go by to his house tonight and just crank his mailbox. You leave a note and tell him it's from us. From Jeremy. Destroy that. Oh, that would be funny.
Yeah, it'd be funny.
You don't think it'd be funny?
I'd say lawn job, but it's the climate. You know, it's just
they don't have lawns.
dry.
It'd just be rocks
desert,
and shit.
right?
Yeah. Best piece of advice you've ever received?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Don't take no for an answer if it's something you really want.
Oh,
Yeah.
we were just talking about that before the podcast.
Just be careful with that one. You know, that's a.
Sometimes you're working against your own best interests and you don't know it. But
Maybe get her to sign a waiver first or something.
that's a dangerous one for sure. You can get yourself into trouble with that one. But honestly, just being persistent has knocked down more barriers than anything else. It's super easy to make comfort-based decisions in this world, and do things, go the easy path, do things that everybody else thinks are more reasonable. I've lived my life by not doing the reasonable thing at any point. And I don't regret a minute of it, man.
It's good.
Favorite car movie?
Ooh,
or gun movie. You can go gun movie if you want to, but if you want to go car movie, we'll accept that as well.
Or fighter
probably
movie.
Bullet, man.
Fighter movie.
Bullet.
Bullet?
Yeah.
Yeah, Bullet's good.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
How real was Top Gun?
So the first Top Gun was
Opportunity
abysmally
to ask a
wrong.
legitimate.
It's good.
Yeah, that's 100%. The first Top Gun was purely, they did the things that they did in the aviation side for ease of filming.
But they wore way shorter shorts in real life.
it was the whole aileron roll as a dogfight maneuver is just ludicrous. But it was bad from an aviation perspective. The second Top Gun was actually, apart from the whole Mach 27,000 or whatever the hell they did in the opening sequence there, that piece of silliness, the rest of it was fairly on point. They did a much better job. Like, everything, performance characteristics, the way you do ridgeline crossings, things like that. My girlfriend actually was making fun of me because she made me watch it. I didn't want to watch the second Top Gun because I was scarred from I had an F-14 Tomcat roommate that watched it like on repeat when I was in the RAG for the Hornet. And his dog named Maverick, he'd be out in his flight suit yelling for it because it got out on the beach. It's terrible. So anyway, the second one was actually quite good. And they did a really good job with some of the representation of the aviation scenes, to the point where I was sitting on the couch and I was actually moving when in the flight scenes. So yeah, my girlfriend was giving me shit about that.
It comes right back, huh?
It's certainly an immersive kind of thing.
It's not like Fast and Furious where you shift 47 times.
How are you? Go ahead.
When you bring up the Fast and the Furious, I don't know how to find it. I'll have to go back through Instagram. There's a guy, he's like a comedian, younger kid, and he goes to car shows and just says Fast and the Furious lines together.
Oh, really?
It's fucking hilarious. Like, he challenges them to races, but all like in character, and they don't
have no
know.
idea.
Yeah, but it's so good.
When you're flying commercial, are you uneasy because you're not in control?
No, I have no interest in being a bus driver, man. I don't have a commercial pilot's license or a private pilot license. It's just I never got one because it's like, wait, can I hang ordnance off of a Cessna 172? No, okay, not interested. So it's like, I don't know. The aviation side of it was a way to get to work. I enjoyed it. Don't get me wrong. Nothing like a low level at night. Cruising through the Arizona or Nevada mountains and turning inverted and just cranking it, 500 plus knots. That was really cool. But, flying point A to point B, that was just, it's going to work.
Oh. Where are we at next?
Right, first car. First car?
We can go first car. Sometimes we like to guess. It depends on how good the interview was and what kind of little tips and things we picked up along the way. We like to sometimes guess. There's a couple of questions that we didn't get to that we'll probably need to clarify first. So
sure.
You were a gunsmith at 17, and what part of the country was this?
Pennsylvania.
All right. City outside?
Very rural.
This is not early 90s?
Lancaster. It wasn't a wagon. You weren't in Lancaster County, were you?
No, I was in Elk County, Pennsylvania.
All right. Elk County, Pennsylvania. And you bought your first car? Or was it gifted?
Bought it.
All right. What year did you graduate high school?
92.
Pennsylvania, 1990.
That'd be an early 80s car. Probably an early 80s, late 70s car.
Could be a late 70s car, but it's Pennsylvania. They got some winners.
And losers.
Winters.
Winters.
I said winters.
They said they had some winners out there.
They got some winters in Pennsylvania. It's rural. 1990s thing. It's 1,000% a truck. Probably not a cool truck, but it's a truck. It's got to be a truck.
Look, I'm going to throw it out there. It's so fucking random. I could be
station
so far
wagon?
off
You're
base.
station wagon.
It's just what hit me. I'm just going with my gut, my intuition on this one, and it's a hatchback Chevette is what came to me. He said he slipped up.
Yeah.
It was embarrassing.
I was thinking
So
truck.
I grabbed onto that, and then that's where my mind went.
Oh, I would go foreign car
Wasn't
before I
that
go
embarrassing?
Okay. You win some, you lose some.
It's a truck. It's 100% a truck.
I think I'm going 1985 Toyota.
Pickup?
Nope, Camry.
Oh, I'm going Toyota pickup. I'm going mid 80s.
Those are cool. It's not embarrassing.
Mid 80s Toyota pickup.
It's definitely American.
It's a Toyota pickup.
Okay.
That's my guess. What's the answer?
The answer is a 1982 Datsun King Cab pickup.
Oh, you weren't far off.
Whoa. Okay.
Oh, that's close.
You guys were good tonight.
Oh, shit.
I now have to go change my recovery questions on a number of passwords.
What? And now this is Jeremy's personal favorite question. Your favorite law enforcement interaction story? We've all had them.
On the other side of the law, not.
Yeah.
Not enforcing?
Yeah.
No, not enforcing.
Okay.
Being enforced.
or if that one is better. Like
Yeah,
if you guys-
whatever your favorite.
That's a tough one. There've been some.
We all have had them.
This is the mental struggle of should I share this or not?
Yeah, that's exactly what's going on.
I got a good job.
They did a deep dive, but they didn't do that deep a dive.
Did I put this on the resume?
I would have to say, if you said what was my favorite law enforcement interaction, it would involve the Fort Worth Alliance Air Show and an officer that I met during that air show.
Were you a pilot at that time?
I was a pilot at that time.
He buzzed the tower. It sounds like. All right, we'll leave it at that.
Use your imagination.
Daughter, that
Everybody
kind of
can
thing.
use their imagination.
First, so your first vehicle, your favorite story about that car. I'm guessing, judging by the history of most of the talented, successful, entertaining individuals that we've had, you probably wrecked the shit out of that truck.
That truck was not wrecked.
Whoa.
Yep. So that was my way back and forth to work. I was pretty respectful of that guy. Plus, 2.2 liter inline four. You weren't really going to tear it up with manual transmission, the whole deal.
Couldn't get
You weren't
enough
breaking
speed going.
70 even if you wanted to.
Yeah.
It would be definitely a downhill requirement to break 70. So no, it was that one I did not wreck. I have wrecked a few. I wrecked a 87 Crown Vic. That's the one that gave me the rod in my arm. Nearly killed myself there. Broke the car in half.
If you hurt yourself in a Crown Vic, that's a hit because that is
That's a tank.
That's a fucking
It's
tank.
a tank. Yeah. Tore it in half. It looks, it's unrecognizable basically. And it wasn't, I was only doing like 50, 55. I hit a bridge abutment and then it rolled and hit a tree and broke in half. And I drug me on the side, door came off, that kind of stuff. But it was just completely pieces. There's still an intake manifold an exhaust manifold stuck in a tree on old 948 Old Cozy Road.
Left
Wow.
your mark.
That's a good wreck.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I don't think they did enough good destructive testing on that vehicle.
No.
Should have made it out of polymer or something.
I've seen some wrecks in Crown Vics, man. And that you tear one in half, that's
You're doing something.
an abrupt
Is that a-
stop.
That's a unibody?
Yeah.
I think they're
Was.
frame cars.
Are they?
They're full frame cars. Crown Vics are? Yeah, because Caprices were. I think they're similar platforms. It's been an absolute fucking blast. We got to do it again. I got so many more questions about stuff. I got questions about fighter pilot stuff. I got questions about war. I got questions about Magpul.
You know what? It's not. You know what's not a question is whether or not you're wearing that Magpul T-shirt to work tomorrow. You're coming chest out with that Magpul shirt on tomorrow. Guaranteed.
I'll wait till the episode drops. I'll wait till the day the episode drops, and I'm gonna wear it. Be like, yeah, see,
So
exactly. You're an asshole.
There's
by the
nothing
way.
wrong with that.
I'm just saying. You take it fun. I mean, come on, man.
Let me wear my fucking Magpul
You're
shirt.
welcome to. I'm just saying. It was a
I'm gonna
fun time.
tonight. I'm gonna go on the site. I'm gonna buy a new Magpul shirt just to wear for
Like
you.
it. There you go.
Pick me up one too.
No, I'm not going to.
I'm on board for the big win.
Yeah, you guys gotta come out here. You gotta see the shop. We gotta do this in person.
Would love to.
And me and Phil are gonna be hitting you up. We gotta make an order some DACA cases and a few other things.
Absolutely.
you got shut out of that.
You're not getting one. Me and Phil are getting one.
That's
You're an
all right.
asshole. You don't get shit. Duane, it's been fucking awesome, man. Seriously, had a great time.
Thanks, dude.
Where can
Pleasure.
people follow you and Magpul? Obviously, everybody knows where Magpul's at on the Instagram.
Magpul.com and then Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. That's us, Magpul. We're there.
We going to the SHOT Show this year? Are we doing SHOT Show this year?
I think this is the year.
This is the year. We've talked about it the last 4 years and haven't gone.
Definitely need to stop by, and we got something Wednesday night that you need to attend.
Sweet.
We need to make it happen. We're doing SHOT Show.
We'll be there.
We're knocking it. We're locking it in right now.
It's January?
February. December.
January. So third week of January usually.
Beginning of
I think it's the same time as Barrett Jackson.
It's a week before, a week after. We can make it work.
Right.
Dude, we can make it work. We're going to be out there anyway, West Coast.
Dude, Scott's got a jet. Scott's got a jet. Just
Yeah, Scott's got a jet. Yeah. Appreciate it, man.
Thanks, dude.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Take care, man.
Been fun.
Oh, man, it's been fucking awesome. I'm so excited. Are we doing whiskey review on this?
Did we
did the whiskey
last
review on
time?
this one?
I don't think we did this whiskey review because it was in studio. I could be wrong.
The one thing I'll say, I feel like
might have done it.
I'm on a stretch of drinking like not so good bourbon
Yeah.
for a while.
It's nice to drink good
And
bourbon.
it's
It's always a kind of an eye opener when you get back to something like really rare, high end. You're like, oh shit, this is why I like bourbon. And
We might have done the review. If we did the review, go back and find it.
yeah.
And if we
If
didn't,
not, it's fucking phenomenal.
hey, Michter's Tent. It's fucking great. Try to find it.
Yeah, it's
Probably
one of,
won't.
it's up there. It's one of the best.
It's one of the best. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you again next week.